The very air hung heavy, thick with a dread that had seeped into the bones of an entire nation. In the desolate valley of Elah, two armies stood locked in a stalemate, not by strategy or maneuver, but by sheer, paralyzing terror. On one ridge, the Philistines, a formidable force, exuded an aggressive confidence. On the opposing slope, the Israelite army, chosen by God, felt their courage drain with each rising sun, their resolve eroding under the relentless psychological assault. This was not merely a conflict of swords and spears, but a battle for the soul, a test of faith against the crushing weight of impossible odds. For 40 days, this grim tableau had repeated itself. Each morning, from the Philistine ranks, emerged a figure of such monstrous proportions that his very presence seemed to warp the landscape. Goliath of Gath, a giant whose bronze armor shimmered like an intimidating monument, whose spear shaft was like a weaver's beam, strode into the valley. His voice, a booming challenge that echoed off the hills, was less a call to combat and more a declaration of Israel's utter insignificance. He defied not just their army, but their God, mocking their covenant and their very existence. The Philistines reveled in his audacity, their cheers a constant reminder of Israel's humiliation. The problem was stark, tangible, and seemingly insurmountable. No Israelite soldier, no seasoned warrior, dared to answer Goliath's taunts. King Saul, once a towering figure himself, now stood diminished by fear, his once great army reduced to a collection of trembling men. The prize offered for slaying the giant, great riches, the king's daughter in marriage, and freedom from taxes for the slayer's family, remained unclaimed, overshadowed by the certainty of death. This was a crisis of leadership, of morale, and most profoundly, of faith. The people of Israel, who had witnessed God's mighty hand deliver them from Egypt, part the Red Sea, and conquer powerful kingdoms, now found themselves utterly paralyzed by a single man, albeit one of terrifying stature. Their collective memory of divine intervention seemed to have faded in the face of such overwhelming physical threat. This particular account will delve into the profound internal landscape of those caught in this crucible of fear and doubt. It will explore the silent, gnawing despair that gripped a nation chosen by the Almighty, a people who had forgotten, in their moment of greatest need, the true source of their strength. The narrative will not merely recount the clash of physical forces but will illuminate the subtle, yet powerful, shift in perspective that allows the unseen to triumph over the seen. It is a story that asks, what happens when conventional wisdom fails, when all human solutions are exhausted, and hope seems a distant, forgotten memory? Imagine, for a moment, standing on that ridge, feeling the chill of the morning air, and hearing that booming voice shatter the silence, day after day. Imagine the shame, the helplessness, the erosion of spirit as a seemingly insurmountable obstacle stands between you and peace. Many have faced their own giants, challenges that loom large, threatening to crush their spirit, whisper doubts into their hearts, and make their own resources feel utterly inadequate. Whether it is a personal struggle, a professional hurdle, or a societal injustice, the feeling of being overwhelmed by a colossal, unyielding force is universally understood. This narrative seeks to explore not just the historical event, but the timeless human experience of confronting the impossible, and the unexpected places where true courage and unwavering conviction can be found. It is a journey from the depths of collective despair to the dawn of an astonishing, divinely orchestrated victory, revealing that the battle is not always won by the strong, nor the race by the swift, but by those who understand where true power resides. It will begin far from the battlefield, in the quiet, unassuming life of a shepherd boy, whose world was about to collide with the fate of a nation. Far from the shadow of the menacing giant, David, the youngest son of Jesse, lived a life steeped in the rhythms of the Judean wilderness. His days unfolded amidst the bleating of sheep and the whisper of the wind through rocky outcrops, a pastoral existence that honed his senses and deepened his contemplative spirit. Unlike his older brothers, who bore the weight of military service, David's primary responsibility was the quiet guardianship of the flock. This solitary vocation fostered an intimate connection with the natural world and, more profoundly, with the divine. He learned to discern the subtle shifts in the landscape, to anticipate danger, and to rely on an unseen hand for protection, experiences that quietly forged a resilient faith within his youthful heart. The mundane routine of shepherding was abruptly interrupted when Jesse, concerned for his sons on the battlefield, dispatched David with provisions. This journey, from the tranquil pastures to the tense military encampment, served as David's initial foray into a world utterly alien to his experience. As he traversed the dusty paths, the air grew thick with a palpable anxiety, replacing the serene calm of his familiar hills. The sounds shifted from the gentle murmur of nature to the distant, unsettling clamor of a war camp, a stark transition that marked his passage into a domain of fear and uncertainty. He was a messenger, a provider of sustenance, yet his arrival carried an unintended significance, drawing him inexorably towards a destiny he could not yet comprehend. Upon reaching the Israelite lines, David encountered his elder brothers, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, who were entrenched in the army's despair. Their reaction to his presence was immediate and sharply dismissive. Eliab, in particular, greeted him with a cutting scorn, questioning his motives, accusing him of abandoning his simple duties for the thrill of witnessing the conflict. There was an undercurrent of resentment, perhaps born of their own frustration and fear, that manifested as disdain for their younger brother's apparent naivete. They saw only a boy, a shepherd, utterly unequipped for the grim realities of warfare, and certainly unworthy of offering any insight into their predicament. This familial rejection, a profound initial test, could have easily dampened David's spirit, prompting him to retreat to his familiar world. Nevertheless, David's spirit remained undeterred by their harsh words. He observed the paralyzing fear that gripped the seasoned warriors, the way their faces mirrored the despondency that had settled over the entire camp. He listened to the Philistine champion's daily insolent challenge, a torrent of blasphemy hurled against the armies of the living God. While others heard only a terrifying threat, David perceived a profound affront to the divine. His internal landscape, shaped by solitary communion and reliance on a higher power, reacted not with the terror of the soldiers, but with a righteous indignation. He questioned the collective inaction, not out of youthful bravado, but from a deep-seated conviction that such defiance of the Almighty could not stand. This burgeoning conviction was not born of ignorance, but rather from a wellspring of prior, often solitary, triumphs. David's mind drifted to past encounters in the wilderness, confronting savage predators that threatened his flock. He recalled the terrifying roars of the lion and the aggressive charges of the bear, beasts far more formidable than any sheepdog. Yet, in those moments of extreme peril, armed with only a shepherd's staff and sling, he had prevailed. He had not triumphed through brute strength or superior weaponry, but through an unwavering trust that the same God who protected him from these creatures would also empower him. These wilderness victories, often unseen and uncelebrated, served as his true mentors, instilling an unshakable confidence in divine intervention. They were the crucible in which his unique brand of courage had been forged, preparing him for a confrontation far greater than any he could have imagined. These memories, rather than a human advisor, provided the essential wisdom and spiritual armament for the trials ahead. Yet, his resolve, far from dimming under the weight of his brother's dismissiveness or the army's pervasive fear, intensified with each passing moment. David's persistent inquiries about the giant's defiant blasphemy, initially met with patronizing glares, began to ripple through the discouraged ranks. It was not merely a young man's insolence, but a deep spiritual indignation that fueled his questions, an internal fire contrasting sharply with the cold dread gripping the camp. He could not reconcile the grandeur of God with the abject terror displayed by his chosen people. This unconventional audacity, emanating from a figure so outwardly unsuited for the battlefield, began to draw curious glances and whispers, slowly percolating up the chain of command. Consequently, word of this unusual determination, of a shepherd boy who dared to speak of challenging the Philistine champion, reached the ears of King Saul. In a court paralyzed by inaction and desperate for any glimmer of hope, even such an improbable proposition warranted investigation. This moment, when the shepherd was summoned from the periphery of the camp to the very presence of the king, represented a crucial, divinely orchestrated turning point. It was not chance that brought David before Saul, but a subtle yet undeniable guidance, directing the course of events toward a confrontation that would redefine the nation's understanding of strength. The path to the throne room, though physically short, was a spiritual chasm, now bridged by providence. When finally brought before the monarch, Saul's immediate reaction was one of profound skepticism and pity. The king, a man of imposing physical stature himself, saw only a boy, ruddy and youthful, standing before him. He articulated the stark reality of the situation. David possessed no military training, no armor, no experience in warfare. He was, in Saul's eyes, utterly unprepared to face a seasoned warrior, let alone a colossal champion whose reputation alone struck fear into the hearts of veteran soldiers. This was the chasm between human logic and divine possibility, a stark divergence in perspective that needed to be bridged. However, David's response transcended mere youthful enthusiasm or naive courage. It was imbued with an unwavering conviction rooted in a profound understanding of God's inherent character. He did not boast of his own prowess but testified to the living God's unassailable power and faithfulness. He recounted how God had delivered him from the jaws of wild beasts that threatened his flock, framing these past deliverances not as personal achievements, but as clear demonstrations of divine care and empowerment. This was the hidden truth he unveiled: the battle was not against flesh and blood alone, but a spiritual affront, and God would not abandon his people when his name was defied. He articulated that the Philistine, despite his physical might, was uncircumcised, outside the covenant, and therefore stood no chance against the God of Israel. Ultimately, Saul, cornered by desperation and seeing no other viable option, reluctantly assented. He offered David his own armor, a gesture of both protection and symbolic transfer of authority, though David found it cumbersome and unsuitable. This pivotal assent, therefore, marked more than just a royal decree. It signified David's definitive crossing the threshold. He was no longer merely a shepherd tending sheep, but a divine instrument, stepping irrevocably from the ordinary world of pastoral care into the extraordinary, perilous arena of national destiny. His commitment was sealed, not by a formal oath, but by an internal resolve to champion God's honor, a spiritual courage that far outweighed any physical impediment. This profound transition underscored the true nature of divine intervention. It wasn't about a sudden, miraculous thunderbolt, but about God working through the heart of an available individual, opening doors that seemed impassable, and empowering an unlikely champion to fulfill his purpose. Consider how often in life, when all conventional avenues are exhausted, an unexpected path emerges, often through the most unassuming means. This is the essence of God's guidance, not always a grand spectacle, but a quiet, persistent nudging, a divine orchestration of circumstances that aligns human willingness with heavenly will, setting the stage for the impossible to become reality. David's journey into the valley was now not just a walk, but a solemn, faith-driven march into the heart of his destiny. As David descended into the valley of Elah, the air itself seemed to thicken, laden with the collective apprehension of two armies. The morning sun, usually a source of warmth, cast long, distorted shadows that danced like specters across the rugged terrain. Each step brought him closer to the immense figure of Goliath, whose bronze armor now reflected the light with an intimidating gleam, no longer a distant threat but a formidable presence dominating the landscape. The very ground seemed to vibrate with the Philistines' taunts, a cacophony of mockery that assaulted the ears and attempted to erode the spirit, a psychological onslaught designed to crush any remaining vestige of Israelite courage. Amidst this overwhelming display of hostile might, David moved with an uncharacteristic calm. His eyes, accustomed to scanning horizons for lost sheep or lurking predators, now meticulously observed the giant's movements, his stance, the precise way he wielded his formidable spear. This was not a boy entranced by fear, but a shepherd calculating angles, assessing vulnerabilities, and processing information with a quiet intensity. He understood that this confrontation transcended mere physical combat, it was a spiritual battle, and his preparation involved not just a physical approach, but a profound mental and spiritual centering, a deliberate refusal to be swayed by the visible terror that paralyzed thousands. His chosen implements, 5 smooth stones from the streambed and his well-worn sling, were not merely tools, they were extensions of his disciplined skill and unwavering faith. Unlike the elaborate, cumbersome armor of Saul, which David had wisely discarded, these simple articles represented a reliance on precision, practiced ability, and divine empowerment over brute force or conventional military might. The weight of each stone in his hand was a tangible connection to his past triumphs, a silent affirmation of the extraordinary power that could be channeled through the ordinary. This deliberate choice underscored a fundamental truth: true strength often resides not in outward display, but in inner conviction and the mastery of one's unique gifts. Furthermore, the immediate environment presented its own array of challenges beyond the giant's physical presence. The unspoken skepticism from the Israelite soldiers, their wary glances, and their palpable despair, constituted a subtle but persistent adversary. David had to navigate not only Goliath's menacing posture but also the pervasive atmosphere of defeatism that clung to his own people. His solitude in this moment was profound. No human ally stood beside him with a sword or shield. His only companion was the resolute certainty of God's presence, a conviction that isolated him from the collective fear, yet simultaneously empowered him beyond measure. Consider, for a moment, the immense pressure of such a situation. When confronting your own monumental challenges, which often appear insurmountable, the temptation to adopt conventional, yet ineffective, solutions can be overwhelming. David's refusal to don Saul's armor was a powerful statement against conforming to a system that had already proven its inadequacy. It demonstrated a profound insight, that genuine victory often requires an unconventional approach, one rooted in personal strengths and a trust in higher guidance, rather than simply mimicking what has failed for others. His actions effectively challenged the prevailing wisdom of the battlefield, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, unshakable confidence in a different kind of power. This period of intense observation and internal fortitude sharpened David's focus, stripping away any lingering vestiges of his pastoral life, replacing them with the singular purpose of confronting the Philistine. Each step, each breath, became an act of preparation, not for a fight against a man, but for a demonstration of divine sovereignty. The jeers from the Philistine ranks, which continued unabated, served only to reinforce his conviction, transforming external hostility into an internal resolve. It was here, in the crucible of the valley floor, under the gaze of 2 armies, that David's character was not merely tested, but profoundly refined, preparing him for the pivotal moment that lay just ahead. The pervasive shadow of fear that had settled over the valley, eclipsing the very spirit of a nation, gradually began to encounter an unexpected resistance. It was not a grand military strategy or a sudden surge of battle-hardened resolve that initiated this subtle shift, but rather the quiet, almost imperceptible stirring of an alternative understanding. The chasm between an overwhelming physical threat and the collective paralysis it induced became the fertile ground for a different kind of strength to manifest. This nascent courage, born not of martial prowess but of an unwavering internal conviction, started to reframe the seemingly insurmountable challenge. As the narrative unfolded, the initial dismissal of this unconventional viewpoint underscored a profound human tendency to judge by outward appearances and established norms. The resistance encountered, both from those closest to him and from the highest authority, highlighted the difficulty in recognizing profound truth when it departs from expected patterns. Yet, it was precisely in this crucible of skepticism that the depth of his conviction was revealed, demonstrating that true resolve often shines brightest when confronted by doubt and incredulity. The very act of standing apart, of perceiving a spiritual dimension to a material conflict, began to subtly dismantle the psychological fortifications that had imprisoned an entire army. The threads of a simple life, woven with communion and an intimate understanding of creation, converged with a profound trust in an unseen power. This unique preparation, far removed from the training grounds of warriors, became the unexpected wellspring of clarity and purpose. The rejection of inherited, ill-fitting solutions, in favor of what was familiar and honed by personal experience, spoke volumes about the source of his empowerment. It was a testament to the idea that authenticity, when coupled with unwavering faith, can render the most formidable obstacles vulnerable. The deliberate choice of ordinary instruments, imbued with an extraordinary conviction, began to gather the disparate elements of the story into a singular, purposeful trajectory. Reflecting on this journey so far, one cannot help but sense the gathering momentum of a pivotal moment. The cumulative effect of these seemingly minor decisions and profound internal shifts has set the stage for a dramatic redefinition of power itself. The initial dread, the scornful dismissal, the steadfast conviction, and the embrace of unconventional means, all these elements coalesce, pointing towards a revelation that transcends the immediate battlefield. It invites us to ponder how often, in our own lives, the solutions to our most daunting challenges lie not in mirroring the might of the opposition, but in tapping into a deeper, more profound wellspring of purpose and belief. The narrative has meticulously laid the groundwork, demonstrating that the true measure of strength is found not merely in what one possesses, but in what one believes and how that belief is manifested. The unfolding sequence of events illuminates a timeless principle, that the greatest victories are often forged in the crucible of perceived inadequacy, where human limitations give way to divine possibility. It is a testament to the quiet power of conviction, capable of piercing through the loudest boasts and the most imposing displays of force. This convergence of humility, unwavering faith, and a profound sense of divine partnership suggests that the outcome of monumental struggles can hinge not on the size of the combatants, but on the alignment of spirit and purpose. The narrative has moved beyond a simple recounting of events, evolving into a resonant exploration of how courage, when anchored in something greater than oneself, can reshape not just a single encounter, but the very destiny of a people, leaving us poised on the brink of a profound demonstration of this truth. The air, once thick with the suffocating dread of an impossible confrontation, suddenly fractured with an astonishing clarity. The colossal figure, whose very shadow had paralyzed a nation for 40 long days, now lay prone, silenced not by the might of a seasoned warrior, but by the precise trajectory of a shepherd's stone. In that electrifying moment, a single, humble act of faith shattered the illusion of invincibility, transforming the landscape of fear into a tableau of stunned disbelief, then triumphant exultation. The Philistine army, witnessing the collapse of their champion, their symbol of overwhelming power, disintegrated into chaotic retreat, their boasts replaced by panic. The Israelites, freed from their paralysis, surged forward, their shouts of victory echoing through a valley that had, moments before, resonated only with despair. This seismic shift on the battlefield was far more than a military victory, it was a profound spiritual awakening. The nation of Israel, which had allowed itself to be defined by fear and the sheer physical presence of an adversary, was dramatically reminded of the true source of its strength. It was not in the stature of their king, the strength of their chariots, or the number of their swords, but in the unwavering faithfulness of their God. David, the unassuming shepherd, became the living embodiment of this truth, demonstrating that divine power often chooses the most unlikely vessels to manifest its glory. His triumph was not merely his own, but a testament to the enduring principle that when human strength falters, God's omnipotence prevails, often through means that defy conventional wisdom and expectations. The aftermath of this monumental encounter rippled through the fabric of Israelite society, leaving an indelible mark on its collective consciousness. The young shepherd, who had once been dismissed by his own brothers, was now hailed as a national hero, his name forever etched into the annals of their history. His courage, born of an intimate relationship with God and honed in the solitude of the wilderness, served as a beacon of hope and a powerful reminder of what was possible when faith transcended fear. This pivotal moment launched David onto a path of leadership, revealing the qualities of a king after God's own heart, not one defined by outward appearance or worldly power, but by humility, unwavering trust, and a fierce dedication to divine honor. Beyond the immediate historical context, the story of this shepherd and the giant resonates across generations, offering timeless insights into the human condition and the nature of spiritual struggle. It speaks to the universal experience of confronting seemingly insurmountable obstacles, those giants that loom large in our personal and collective lives, threatening to crush our spirit and erode our hope. It challenges us to look beyond the imposing facade of our problems and to discern the spiritual truth underlying every challenge. True courage, this narrative powerfully asserts, is not the absence of fear, but the unwavering conviction that a greater power is at work, capable of turning the tide against all odds. The legacy of this event is a profound and enduring testament to the transformative power of faith. It teaches us that our perception of a challenge often dictates our capacity to overcome it. When we allow ourselves to be intimidated by the sheer scale of an adversary, we limit our potential and our belief in divine intervention. However, when we anchor our trust in the unseen, in the boundless strength of a faithful God, even the most formidable giants can be brought to their knees. This narrative is a call to recognize that the battles we face are often less about physical might and more about the alignment of our spirit with divine purpose. The true practice begins now, in recognizing the giants in our own lives, and stepping forward not in our own strength, but with a quiet, unwavering trust in the God who empowers the humble to achieve the impossible. It is a reminder that faith, even as small as a shepherd's stone, can move mountains and redefine the very meaning of victory.